Hello, everyone. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, have no worries. I'm Aaron Porras, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
An Israeli IDF officer and 2 soldiers have been injured after a Palestinian terrorist crossed the Gaza border and opened fire early this morning. The gunman was shot down and killed by return fire, and the Israeli soldiers are now reportedly recovering well in Beersheva's Soroka Hospital.
Though Hamas has not taken responsibility for this attack, the attacker has been identified as Hani Abu Salah, a Hamas military member who was armed with both a rifle and grenades when he opened fire. Hani Abu Salah is also the brother of Fadi Abu Salah, who was killed by IDF fire last May during the so-called March of Return riots. But as per policy, the IDF still holds Hamas responsible for the violence, and Israeli tanks have retaliated against Hamas outposts, while Israeli aircraft were reportedly seen flying overhead. Further, the Israeli army has deployed extra troops along the Gaza border ahead of expected violent flare-ups. Hamas, on the other hand, has not responded for comment. Coincidentally, this incident follows a 4-day IDF exercise meant to prepare for a possible urban war with Gaza, especially following intelligence reports claiming that Hamas and Iran are going to be coordinating their potential attacks. But regardless of the ongoing violence, Israeli military officials are warning that the aforementioned drill was intended only to weaken Hamas and not to destroy the terror group entirely, so that the Gazan leaders would still be capable of governance following the outbreak of war.
In other news, the U.S. is making good on its threats to choke Iran financially. On Wednesday, the American administration made the rare decision to slap Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif with personalized sanctions. The Trump White House is convinced that hard-hitting sanctions will bring Iran back to the negotiating table.
The question is, will it really work? Because Zarif himself appeared nonplussed as he took to Twitter to say that these sanctions will have zero impact on him. He even sarcastically thanked Trump for considering him to be such a threat, while pointing to how toothless the sanctions will be, since he has no property or interests outside of Iran. What do these sanctions really do? Well, Zarif's now blacklisted under the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, which means his assets are blocked in the U.S., and other Americans can't conduct any business with him either. And U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin justified the decision by saying that Zarif implements the reckless agenda of Iran's supreme leader. Meanwhile, all the other sanctions are dramatically hurting the Iranian economy. The situation is so dire, in fact, that Iran has decided to rename and revamp its currency. So, gone now is the Iranian rial, and in comes the toman. This is as the rial's value has plummeted in the wake of ongoing sanctions. For example, 3 years ago, $1 would get you 37,000 rials, whereas now a dollar amounts to 180,000. Iran says this new currency will be much more effective, though, as it simply removes a few zeros from the currency.
For the first time in years, the Israeli government has approved a plan to grant 700 building permits to Palestinians in the Israeli-controlled Area C of the West Bank. Now, this is a move that represents a major shift in Israeli policy, since the government hasn't approved any construction for Palestinians in the area for the last 4 years.
The plan introduced by Prime Minister Netanyahu has also approved the building of 6,000 new homes in Israeli settlements. The deal received unanimous approval after the Security Cabinet held 2 lengthy meetings on the matter. Hawkish Transportation Minister Bezalel Smotrich is just one of the officials who voted in favor of the plan, saying the Palestinians who have been living in Area C before the 1994 Oslo Accords have the right to build and develop homes as long as it does not produce a de facto Palestinian state. Palestinians are rarely granted building permits in Area C, even though thousands of homes have been green-lighted for Israeli settlers in recent years. It's not clear if the permits provided are for new construction or are for preventing the destruction of buildings that are currently slated for demolition. The last time a plan for Palestinian building permits was presented at the Security Cabinet, it was frozen indefinitely. The plan was to expand the Palestinian city of Kalkilia, but after settler leaders heard about the program, they launched a campaign against it. Israel has full military and administrative control over Area C, which makes up about 60% of the territory in the West Bank. Sources believe this latest move to approve Palestinian construction in the region has stemmed from pressure by the American administration. U.S. officials are slated to arrive in Israel in the next couple of days as part of a regional tour meant to promote their long-delayed peace plan.
Well, moving on, over the coming weeks, we may finally be learning a lot more about U.S. President Trump's highly anticipated peace plan. Trump will apparently be rolling out the details of the plan while hosting several Arab leaders at Camp David. And that meeting is set to take place before Israel's September 17th election. a shift from the administration's initial statements.
But why the change of heart? Well, apparently, while Israel isn't invited to the summit, PM Netanyahu is helping plan the meeting, with hopes that such a high-profile gathering may give him a pre-election boost. For now, though, Jared Kushner, Trump's Mideast envoy and son-in-law, will come to the region this week in order to boost support for the initiative. It's not clear yet exactly who will be invited to Camp David. However, Kushner, who will extend the invitation, is set to visit Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates soon. Israel will not be on the invite list for fear that other Arab countries may not come. As for the plan itself, the details are hazy. What we do know is that the plan is said to advocate for some sort of Palestinian entity, but not a sovereign state, and will allow for a Palestinian presence in East Jerusalem without making it their capital. It's doubtful the Palestinians will go for such a plan, especially given that an independent Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem has been their goal for decades. That said, though, the plan does offer the Palestinians 700 housing permits in Area C, something that they would certainly find attractive. And U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman is hopeful that the plan will work too. In an appearance on CNN on Tuesday, he spoke about the plan's potential, adding that he thought the plan would be a win-win for both sides and that the administration is dedicated to improving the quality of life for Palestinians. Ambassador Friedman also says the administration is not interested in referring to commonly used phrases like a two or a one-state solution. Rather, they're exploring alternative ways to foster Palestinian autonomy that doesn't interfere with Israeli security. The official is also dismissing initial reports claiming he advocated for Israel to annex parts of the West Bank. He says that his statements were simply hypothetical in nature, but that the press made too much out of his comments.
Quoting unnamed Western sources, London-based Arabic-language newspaper Asharq al-Awsat reported Tuesday that Israeli F-35 fighter jets bombed Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria earlier this month. And according to reports, in the first attack on July 19th, the IAF hit a base in Iraq housing a number of Iranian-linked fighters, as well as Iranian-made ballistic missiles, which were hidden in food refrigeration trucks. Further, a number of IRGC and Hezbollah combatants were allegedly killed in that strike, though it's unclear how many, if at all. Then on Sunday, Israel supposedly struck another base northeast of Baghdad, Iraq, where Iranian advisors and a shipment of ballistic missiles were said to be. And while Israel has not admitted to these attacks, all this comes after Israel warned Iraq against permitting Iranian-aligned militias to operate in the country. Similarly, Israeli attacks are said to have killed Hezbollah operative Mashur Zidan, who was working alongside the southern Syrian border, in addition to striking the area nearby. Then meanwhile, as Israel works militarily to weaken Iranian proxy operations to the north, the United States and Israel are cooperating diplomatically to strengthen international organizations which will help in this fight. Specifically, Jerusalem and Washington are trying to upgrade the mandate of UNIFIL, or the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, so that it will allow the security peacekeeping force to inspect any area of southern Lebanon without forward notice and coordination. Well, to do this to the most effective extent, 2 clauses must be added to UNIFIL's charter in August during its annual mandate review. First, a clause that would allow UNIFIL to enter any area along the Lebanon-Israel border unrestricted, and second, a clause ordering UNIFIL to immediately report if Hezbollah or anyone else attempts to infringe on this unfettered access. Time will tell if the efforts pay off. In other news, it appears that United States President Donald Trump was onto something when he decided to defund the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA. As according to a leaked internal UN report, the agency is now being accused of mismanagement and abusing authority in the midst of a financial crisis. Well, UNRWA said that it is fully cooperating with the UN's investigation ever since this report found, quote, credible and corroborated instances of abuse of power stemming from the highest echelons of UNRWA's management, including from Commissioner General Pierre Cranbuel, who the report says promoted a woman with whom he had a romantic entanglement with. And then the two allegedly traveled the world together in business class, no less. But that said, for now, Cranbuel says that he would not hesitate to implement the findings from the investigation once it's completed. And that's good because the list of accusations are lengthy and damning. It mentions, for example, inappropriate sexual acts, nepotism, reprisals, discrimination, and other abuses of authority for personal gain and or to suppress legitimate differences of opinion. Now, this report is not exactly new, however. It was initially sent to UN Security General Antonio Guterres in December, and the investigation has been ongoing ever since. Further, for now, 2 senior UNRWA officials have resigned in light of the report. But for years, the UN agency has battled accusations of corruption, as ostensibly, the organization is supposed to help millions of Palestinian refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and the West Bank. But accusations of collaborating with Hamas and helping with the indoctrination of Palestinian children to terror via their textbooks has left its critics livid. Further, United States Middle East peace envoy Jason Greenblatt said that he was extremely concerned about UNRWA allegations, and he accused the organization of peddling a broken and unsustainable model.
In a tragic stretch of just 24 hours, 3 Israelis were murdered across the country on Sunday in unrelated incidents. First, at a chicken factory in Kiryat Shmona in the north near the Lebanese and Syrian borders, 20-year-old factory worker Bashar Hakroush of Kfar Kana was stabbed, allegedly, by a colleague. And this after the pair supposedly got into an argument. But Magen David Adom paramedics declared Hakroush dead at the scene, and police quickly arrested the suspect following a short search. Then, meanwhile, in al-Fahim, an Arab Israeli city outside the northern West Bank, a 47-year-old man was arrested trying to flee after his 83-year-old mother, Zainab Mahmoud, was stabbed to death in her home. Well, the son is suspected of involvement in his mother's death, and indeed the family's relatives were the ones to call the police, even altercating with officers over why the suspect wasn't arrested sooner. Then, finally, for the third and arguably most shocking incident on Sunday, 40-year-old Ofir Chasdai was shot multiple times and killed outside a shopping mall in the central Israeli town of Ramle, all over a parking spot. According to police and witness reports, the 70-year-old suspect, who has since been arrested, shot Chasdai dead in front of his wife and small children when Chasdai asked the suspect to move his car. The suspect was crossing over 2 handicapped parking spots when Chasdai, his wife, and 2 of his 3 daughters were trying to park there. But Chasdai's wife has muscular dystrophy, and their 2 daughters, who were present, aged 9 and 18 months, also suffer from cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy, respectively. So speaking with the press, Chasdai's wife, Dikla, is now appealing to the public for help in their time of sorrow and need. Dikla says, quote, "I have no idea how I will manage alone, because Ofir did everything," end quote. So please, if you can, consider donating to Dikla through Israeli Discount Bank, branch 669, account number 644-62902.
It appears that Israeli and Palestinian tensions have boiled over now, as on Thursday, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that all agreements with Israel will come to an abrupt halt. In fact, during a speech in Ramallah, Abbas was unequivocal when he said that their response to Israeli occupation would be to nullify all agreements with the Jewish state, and the first step in implementing this dramatic measure, he said, would be to form a committee to decide how to execute this plan. Though at any rate, at this stage, it's unclear what agreements will be affected, since Israel and the PA do work closely together on a myriad of issues. And from water and security to agriculture, cooperation between the two bodies have been the linchpin behind establishing relative peace within the West Bank. Abbas has made such threats before, however, so the question is what set him off this time. Well, Abbas slammed Israel's decision to demolish Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem last week, and even called the act evidence of Israelis committing ethnic cleansing. Other Palestinian officials, though, are skeptical that Abbas will actually make good on his promises, and a Fatah official spoke to the Jerusalem Post, saying that these committees are formed, but the findings are never released and no moves are ever implemented. Meanwhile, United States President Donald Trump has yet to reveal the political dimensions to his deal of the century, and last month, at a summit in Bahrain, Middle East envoy Jared Kushner laid out the administration's vision behind their $50 billion Peace to Prosperity plan. But that was basically a stimulus package to get the Palestinians to play ball with the Trump administration, which they adamantly refused to do. And now Jordan, too, has expressed outrage over the plan, as Jordanian analysts worry that Trump's political solution would involve absorbing many Palestinians into Jordan, effectively making the country obsolete. And that's because Jordan is home to some 2 million Palestinian refugees. So if nothing in the plan is decided regarding the right of return, these refugees may have to stay in Jordan indefinitely, which Jordan never wanted.
In other news, the 19-year-old British tourist who accused 12 Israeli teens of gang raping her in Cyprus has now admitted to police that she falsified her claims. According to reports, the woman revised her statement to reflect how the sex was indeed consensual, and that she only filed rape charges after she was humiliated by the Israelis because they filmed the sex without consent and then kicked her out of their hotel room. Well, now the alleged victim is herself under arrest in Cyprus, facing charges of giving a false statement over an imaginary offense. And she's expected to be indicted Monday, while her friends are set to be summoned in for testimony. Then, in the meantime, after over a week in detention, the Israeli dozen has returned to Israel, where several of the boys have suggested that they will sue the British girl for anguish caused and libel. Defense attorney Yaniv Habari also said that they will proceed with legal action against the individual that made the false allegations for damages for every day and every moment they were in prison falsely.
Our next step is to proceed with the filing of civil actions against the victim or alleged victim for damages, for pain and suffering, loss of amenities, as well as a number of other heads of damages.
Additionally, the last few boys were greeted with celebrations as they landed in Ben Gurion Airport Sunday. His family and friends whipped out bottles of champagne, stated that they had no regrets, and chanted Am Yisrael Chai, or the people of Israel live. Though they also chanted the Brit is a whore, which brings us to a more moral and subjective point. And that is that while making false charges is horribly wrong, especially charges as serious as sexual assault, so too is filming someone having sex without their consent, and then treating that same person with complete contempt. And finally, at any rate, Cyprus will now be moving forward for the first time ever with the installation of CCTV cameras across the city of Ayia Napa, so that tourists feel safe in the future, and hopefully an incident like this is avoided to begin with.
One of the biggest contributors to the global climate crisis is the meat industry, because while demand for meat-based dishes spreads to more and more menus worldwide, supplying such animal products has an enormous cost. Raising livestock for food alone requires enormous amounts of land, feed, energy, and water, and the animals in turn expel more greenhouse gases than all of the cars on the road combined. Additionally, this is to say nothing about the ethical issues surrounding animal cruelty and welfare. Well, Israeli startup Aleph Farms is here, and they aim to tackle all of these issues in one fell swoop. But before you jump to the conclusion that you have to give up your burgers forever, no, Aleph isn't advocating that you give up meat. They're not even suggesting that you go with a meat alternative. Rather, the Rehovot-based company is producing lab-grown meat, which will hopefully be the first on the market by 2021.
The global market for animal protein is estimated today at over $1 trillion annually, and is growing. The demand for meat globally continues to grow, despite the fact that more and more plant-based alternatives have been released in the last few years.
In fact, Aleph is already in talks with several high-end restaurants in the United States, Europe, and Asia for a soft opening of sorts. Then in 2023, the company plans an official launch that will open in stores. And the way it's done is revolutionary. The lab takes a small amount of cells without slaughtering or harming the animal. And then lab workers culture muscle cells, connective tissue cells, fat cells, and blood cells, all on a 3D scaffold that recreates the shape, taste, and texture of the real deal. Further, while the lab-grown meat is better for the environment and by definition cruelty-free, Aleph's lab-grown meat may even be healthier for consumers in the long run, because the product is nearly genetically identical to the real thing, but it can be cultured with the exact amount of necessary or desired nutrients and free from contamination, antibiotics, and disease. So get your taste buds ready, because soon these steaks will be coming to a cutting board near you.
It's official. The critically acclaimed and beloved singer-songwriter Jennifer Lopez has just arrived in the Holy Land, and she's here for one of the last legs of her It's My Party World Tour. Of course, Jenny from the Block brought her family and her baseball star fiancé, Alex Rodriguez, too, along with 100 crew members, including instrumentalists, technical staff, and 45 tons of equipment.
Arriving on Tuesday ahead of her Thursday performance in Tel Aviv's Hayarkon Park, it looks like J-Lo and her entourage are enjoying Israel. In fact, arriving just a week after her 50th birthday, J-Lo and A-Rod posted a video from their hotel to Instagram, with the beach in the background and a caption reading, "First time I'm here, I'm in love. Energy off the charts." A-Rod reached out to fans, tweeting, "So excited to be in Israel for the first time for J-Lo's show," adding, "How many of you living here are big baseball fans? What would you like to see the MLB do more of? Let me know." Well, of course, Israelis responded with high praises, touting the successes of Israel's own baseball team, while requesting that the MLB consider an exhibition game in Israel. Fans are also asking that perhaps the games could be played a little earlier so that Israelis could get a normal night's sleep. But at any rate, J-Lo is set to perform in Tel Aviv at 8 p.m. on Thursday night, followed by a few performances in Europe as part of her first world tour in 7 years.
Once again, dozens of disabled Israelis have set out onto the streets of Jerusalem this week to protest their persistently low government allowances. The protesters are vowing that these demonstrations are just the beginning of a nationwide campaign.
In fact, the group's leader, Eyal Cohen, says the organization is committed to ensuring that every disabled person in Israel will live in dignity. The group is slamming the current government for breaking promises regarding the raising of allowances, while calling on the finance ministry to pony up the money that disabled citizens need to survive. And those broken promises refer to the government's pledge to up allowances in January. However, the Joint Committee on Finance, Social Welfare, and National Insurance hasn't met that yet, making it highly unlikely that such a raise in allowances will actually occur. According to Maariv news reports from July, the finance ministry is actively refusing to send delegates to the Inter-Ministry Committee designed to resolve this crisis. Currently, those on disability only receive around 3,500 shekels per month from the government, well below the minimum wage. That's why disabled people over the past year have engaged in similar protests already, where they've blocked the entrance to the Knesset and other major roads in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Even back then, their argument has remained pretty much the same, leading Cohen to additionally slam the then finance minister Moshe Kahlon for keeping disabled Israelis in poverty. He's also added a shocking and saddening statistic that 70 disabled persons committed suicide last year because they don't want to be a burden to their families.
The Tel Aviv Appellate Court has now rejected a petition by Filipina foreign worker Geraldine Esta, who's seeking to avoid deportation along with her 2 Israeli-born children. Esta has overstayed her visa by more than a decade, and Judge Ilan Halbaga has now given her 10-year-old son Kian and her 5-year-old daughter Catherine just 45 days to leave the country.
The judge says that the time should be used to settle their affairs before departure and provide an opportunity to say goodbye to friends and acquaintances. However, the lawyer representing the family, Chaya Mena, has already stated that she will be appealing the decision at the Tel Aviv District Court. Still, though, the Estes have been detained at Ben Gurion Airport since Tuesday when immigration officials broke down their door in Ramat Gan and arrested them. Esta arrived in Israel 15 years ago to work as a caregiver, a route which hundreds, if not thousands, of Filipinos also take. But her visa expired back in 2008, so she's been living in the country illegally ever since. Esta's children were born after her visa expired, while their father had already returned to the Philippines. Therefore, in his ruling, Judge Halbaga admitted that the decision would almost inevitably harm the children, acknowledging that moving them from the only country that they know to one that's foreign to them will be difficult. The judge says this was not an easy decision to make and that reading the pleas of Kian's friends and his friends' parents during the hearing was heart-wrenching. Kian just completed 5th grade in Ramat Gan, and his sister Catherine attends a municipal kindergarten in the city too. But the judge has concluded that the fact that their father is in the Philippines already can assist them in the early stages of acclimation.
All right, that's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next week for the next episode of ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us.